Weak competition between firms is a development constraint in Latin America and the Caribbean. It lowers productivity, growth, and innovation, and it contributes to inequality. In your view, what are two or the three largest barriers that keep that limit competition in this region?
I mean, competition issues are pervasive, are very around in many aspects of the economy. And I think in the rest of the world and in Latin America, we have to be concerned about common ownership. We have to be concerned about cartel formation. We have to be concerned about mergers and acquisitions that are anti-competitive. But I think in the age that we live in today, the biggest concern really is technological change that creates dominant firms through scale economies, through network externalities, because the digital economy since the 1980s has been really the driver for the rise of markups, as we call them, which is basically how we measure forms of market power, but also for profit rates that we've seen increasing. And the reason is that this digital technology has a much bigger reach, allows firms to produce at enormous scale, at an enormous cost. Of course, they have to invest in enormous amounts, but these enormous investments are, of course, the barrier to entry. And if you take any platform, an Uber or an eBay, it's all about building up, first of all, the technology, the platform, but then building up also the network of drivers in the case of Uber, of users in the case of eBay. And these scale kind of economies that this generates translates in basically the impossibility really for competitors to enter. And I think for Latin America, like the rest of the world, I think that's the biggest challenge.
And what would be the key steps or reforms that countries in Latin America need to take in order to, improve the competition and also improve people's lives?
Well, I think it's, as you say, this is all about improving people's lives. These are policies that have widespread implications from labor markets, from startups, from small businesses, and that inequality that affect really people directly. And I think in Latin America, one issue is, I believe, coordination, international coordination, because what we see is that policies are often, very local, but the firms that these digital firms are transcending borders. And as they transcend borders, what we really see is that the competition issue that we face, the policy response to that also has to transcend borders. And I think an institution like the International Development Bank is ideally suited to coordinate this policy. I would advocate for an international or Latin American and Caribbean competition authority that actually transcends the border.
And just briefly, from your research and your experience, what would be one example of an effective competition policy?
I think in telecommunication, effective policies is a comparison that I can say between Europe and the US. And this is not, Europe has many problems, but that's where they've been successful, which is that the telecom networks, by European rules, had to be open for competitors. So if you were the owner, say in Spain, Movistar owns a network of cell towers, they had to allow competitors from, for example, the UK or from Poland or wherever to come on these networks. They didn't have to invest and build a network. They could rent the space at rental prices set by the competition authority. And what this has done is it introduced a lot of competition.
Yeah, this is a critical issue for Latin America and the Caribbean. And that's why the IDB recently published its flagship report, Development in the Americas, on this topic. The publication is called Markets for Development, Improving Lives Through Competition. We invite you to download and read the publication. And once again, I want to thank you, Jan, for this insightful conversation.